Up next, we have a roundtable discussion where we talk about AI for the public good and ethical considerations in community safety and privacy. It's our last session that's coming up for ethical. Share this. Take the link and find somebody to watch this. You're not going to want to miss this roundtable discussion. We'll be back in just a few. And greetings all and greetings everyone to the audience that's with us today at GatherVerse.live, which we see that you thankfully are still staying around. Panelists, we'd ask that you unmute your mics at the moment. We're thankful for all of you that have decided to stay with us a little longer, to stay with us for this hour of expression, to really lean in and deep dive on this panel discussion for AI for the public good and ethical consideration, community safety and privacy. This is a discussion and a talk where we're about to lean in and really convey to the world and to the masses why we get together and have these type of events. Each person on this panel has been handpicked and selected based on wanting to express and amplify their voices. Some have returned with us and have been with us with GatherVerse in times past. We value each of you. We want you to know this is a platform for also being able to feel free of open expression and come as you are, an audience for our YouTube gang that's there. When we talk about AI for the public good, what does that mean to you? And as we move forward, we have Emily Wright, who joins us from It'll Be All Right. We have Salman Halawai, founder and CEO of MetaDesigners.co, David Vijamin, founder of Web4 Foundation, of Presence AI, Leena Joshi, who comes to us from South Asia, Drew Falkman, founder of Friends.place, Ruth Diaz, founder of Vortex XR, an explorer of regenerative art in a fascinating way, and Aileda Lindal, who's a great friend of GatherVerse and a valued member of our community. Shall we begin? Drew, we talk about design, we talk about development, but how can the design and application of AI be governed to ensure ethical considerations are at the forefront and not an afterthought of what we're building?
Yeah, that's a great question. Having worked like 20 years in product management, I've seen sort of how things were done with social media in particular, where people didn't think through the ramifications of these applications they were designing. They didn't think through what could happen. What happens if conflict brings more engagement and we're just incentivizing engagement? Then you get more conflict. And look at the world, look how polarized things are. And that's 100% because product managers, when they were designing products, were emphasizing those things. And I think this kind of thing is going to be very important in the world of AI when product managers and designers are putting together experiences around AI. They need to make sure that they're thinking through the ramifications. And look, I'm in Web3. I have been for the last couple of years, and the concept of self-regulation is great in the abstract, but all it takes is one SBF. That's all it takes, one bad player to really mess things up. And so, I think it's going to be important that we police one another a bit socially. And I think it's going to be important at some point to have regulation so long as it doesn't stifle innovation.
I agree. And Ruth, we're going to immediately hard end, and we're getting ready to speed the cadence to the tempo of this because we have a lot of ground to cover. You've been doing fascinating things when it comes to regenerative AI. We must ask, what role can AI play in creating sustainable and regenerative solutions to pressing societal challenges themselves, Ruth?
One of the things I've observed in immersive technology is that as things speed up and we have more access to people all over the world who aren't like us, we have the potential to learn from them and grow empathy, but we also have the potential to objectify them and make them cartoon figures in our mind. AI can be something we objectify also, and we want to use, but not necessarily like understand where it's coming from and how to see our own humanity in the mirror of AI, if that's possible. So some of my own explorations with the Mid-Journey AI has given me a lot of new perspectives just by asking questions directly to it. I believe we can learn about ourselves through these tools, and believing that they're going to separate us and cause harm will make that more likely.
Indeed. And so, Emily, when we talk about AI for the public good, I know that you've been judiciously working on different frameworks when it comes to bias, unbiased, and looking at a different lens. Share with us from what you've been looking about and what you've been working about when it comes to ethical considerations in safety and privacy, and how should we be looking at AI right now?
That actually reminds me of a conversation I had with Drew and Ruth the other day, and we were kind of talking about this and talking about the potential that we have with AI. Like for me, I'm Gen Z, so this is a very important conversation topic for me because this is obviously the framework for my entire generation and for the future of our species. And we were discussing the rate of our evolution and the rate at which we're evolving compared to the rate at which our technology and our artificial intelligences are evolving. And there's kind of this consensus that our AIs are evolving faster than us. So there's this fear that it's going to overtake us, and what will that look like for us and what will that mean? And we were discussing that, well, maybe this is something we can use to our advantage. If we know that our AIs are going to surpass us at some point when it comes to the evolution of our consciousness, how can that help us? If we're the ones setting the framework for our AIs and setting ourselves up for the future, how can we use that to our advantage? And how can we use our AIs to, teach us about ethics and to learn more about ourselves? Because obviously our technology is a reflection of us. So let's make it a reflection of our greatest potential. And it's really cool talking to, Ruth and stuff about some of the things that you're working on. And it really talks to that. And like, well, let's use consciously for our advantage.
Indeed. David, I have a real concern when I think about AI for the public good. And when I think about this UN article that came out about misinformation, disinformation, what's the bigger threat that we're looking at when it comes to AI for public good presently? Your mic, sir.
Right. Well, in terms of AI for the public good, I think that the biggest threat really in the next several years is for us to have a huge glut of information that is artificially generated, perhaps by autonomous agents, but then in addition to that which is being created by the AI, but also content that's being created by humans who are trying to get favor from the algorithms. So they're essentially crafting their content to meet the needs of what the AI is amplifying. So what we'll see is this huge data flywheel of content that really is being directed by the AI. And where is that going to go? I think there's going to be a lot of misinformation and disinformation. Obviously, that's a huge concern, and there's going to be a lot of clickbait, and there's going to be a lot of reinforcement of the things that we're already seeing in social media that are not healthy for people, like the need to use beauty filters and the need to talk about certain things and to adhere to specific narratives or trends to be seen, to get reach.
Indeed. We'll come back to that. You just touched on something that's very, very profound in terms of the filter. Leena, we're bringing it back to you, or we're bringing it to you rather, as we increasingly integrate AI systems into our communities. No doubt we have plenty of communities in our South Asian ecosystems that are filled with technologists throughout. When we talk about integrating AI into the community itself, my concern is what are some of the ethical considerations that we should keep in mind as we continue and as we grow into this narrative of AI integration?
I think key ethical considerations when integrating AI systems include fairness, accountability, transparency, and societal impact. Fairness involves ensuring that AI systems do not discriminate against certain groups or perpetuate existing biases. And accountability entails establishing mechanisms to assign responsibility for the actions and decisions made by AI systems. And transparency uh, involves making AI processes and algorithms explainable and evaluating the potential consequences of AI systems on individuals, communities, and broader society, considering factors such as job displacement and societal inequality and human rights.
Indeed. And thank you for sharing that, Lena. And Salman, I know this is a really big deal for you. It feels like a big part too of what we concluded in when you joined us for WellVerse and we talk about wellness of people. And Aileda, we're getting ready to jump to you as well on this self-same subject because there is a striking intersect between public good, because how are we quantifying good? What is good, audience? When you think about AI for public good, for our YouTube chat people, put in there, what is AI for public good? How are we quantifying good? Is it good for you? Because good for one may not be good for all. It may be very subjective on how we look at this definition of good. So do we need to take this a little bit step further in defining good and how we measure good? Is it ethically good? Is it good in terms of equitable, accessible good? So when we look at that, what does that mean? But Salman, we'll put a pin in my thoughts on that. We want to hop over to your thoughts, to your cognition, and how you're interpreting what you're seeing when it comes to AI for public good.
All right, that is a wonderful question, Christopher. In terms of defining good, we're talking a lot about equality in the world, but we're not talking much about equity, right? We want everyone to be equal within their own circumstances. And the way that AI works and the way that mass products work is they opt for a good and they move for it without regarding the public good or the majority's good, because you've got a lot of different sectors of people, a lot of different pillars to look at. And when you're mass marketing, when you're creating a product for the mass, that is often overlooked. And the AI itself is taking a very scary path, because if we know humans enough, we know that they tend to be manipulative, they tend to lie a lot, they tend to, do a lot of things that just aren't in the best benefit of the general public. And if we know AI enough, we know that data is what it learns from, and it gets its data basically from humans and what humans have created and what history has put in front of it. So I hope I answered the question there.
You did. And then later, we're hopping right over to you. When we talk about AI for public good, we talk about the angst, and Ruth put a hold a pin in that, because we're going to leap right over to you. We talk about angst, we talk about depression, we talk about rejection, we talk about really an end to nowhere for so many people that have been in the workplace with these promise of really strong job career, only to be found that they're being disrupted by innovation themselves. And so when we think about this psychologically, the ideas and the considerations for public good and moving forward, how do we take this with all the warnings that are happening and all the impact and the disruption? How do we walk forward with better steps?
So perspective is everything. Conscious awareness, right, is huge. I speak on that topic quite often, and the importance around conscious awareness. It's not until we are consciously aware that we can make new choices and new decisions. So I myself often speculate, is it the fact that we just haven't had the right technology before now? We haven't had the resources that we have had because now we understand things about our own physical body and our own human brain that we didn't even know existed before. So if we really start to step up our own game, to me, this is an awakening, could be a very positive thing. Disruptors don't have to be negative. So if anything, this should start to bring people back into a state of awareness again, self-awareness, right? Self-assessment, to where we really have to start paying attention. And really, the biggest thing about our attention is our choices, because our algorithms are impacted by our choices and our decisions. So I also look at this from the aspect of we already have to police ourselves on the internet. There's already people using it who are disruptive or manipulative. I heard somebody say, those things, those are things that are out there. We already have to monitor what websites we go to in order to gather data or information or education. Those are things that if you aren't doing it, you should be privy that you should do it. The key is that this is going to be a great resource for the people who really are learning how to wield the power and the capability of it, and those who are moving swift and who are moving fast. And conscious awareness has to be a key component to every last aspect of it. And I'll give you an example here. Like, why are we going to run out? Like, let's look at it this, like it's our opportunity to create the humanity that we would want globally. Now, if we look at it from that perspective, we could build and design something very different if we're conscious and we wake up and we start using our brain to more of its full capacity. We can develop a whole new future, perhaps within the confinement of the new AI resources and the new, for lack of a better term, I think it's going to become like a new dimension, right? Once it really takes off and the fire really lights with the VR and the AR and all of that, which is underway. It's not something that we can run away from. This is something I think we need to step in and we need to take ownership in, and we need to wake up and become conscious.
Sure. Ruth, and thank you, Aileda. Ruth, let's leap on over. We talk about safety, public safety, the approach to AI. Some of us have never interacted with it consciously, directly for the first time until now. How do we use this as a tool, as a value add, as instead of a fear?
Yeah, I mean, I think that fear is healthy. So I have a background in clinical psychology. Fear tells us when we're at the edge of something, and to be aware and be conscious. And I believe that the more we feed our fear into this AI experience that we are all engaging in, the more fear we're going to get back, if we think about it like a mirror. The word manipulation has been brought up a few times, and this is just a little bite for everybody to think about. That word got untangled for me by a professor who basically explained it as manipulation is when I'm using the wrong tool to get my needs met. That's all it is. I'm using the wrong tool to get my needs met. So if we think of AI as a tool, then people are getting their needs met sometimes with the wrong tool. And what does that say about the tools they need? And how do we grow safety around like funneling those people into education and resources and support to create better AI and to create AI that is for human good? So safety is more than ever before, I believe, a co-created consciousness and experience of uplifting and centering marginalized voices and learning how to empathize deeply with ourselves and each other so that we can catch those moments where the wrong tools are being used to connect us together and to ourselves.
And so the opportunity for us to be able to develop a better humanity for human betterment moving forward will constitute us to be able to create and form organizations and startup culture. David, as fans of startup culture and people that care for startup culture, your mic, sir, when we think about startup culture and the approach therein, Is this a good time for people to be able to build a startup using these present emerging tools to move forward and to develop their own platforms, as opposed to being able to try to deter and change other people's platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that these emerging technologies now give us a new set of tools that will allow us to create environments that have the types of characteristics that we want. So we want safe environments. We want environments with data sovereignty. We want privacy. We want fair value exchange. We want to know when we're dealing with a human versus AI, autonomous agent. So with the new technologies, metaverse is one avenue. I'm also working on one called the meta web, which is seeking to change how we look at the web. Right now, we see the web really as this flat thing that's on a two-dimensional screen, but the internet has possibility for limitless layers, and we can choose to build a layer over the web, and this could be accessible with a browser extension or SDKs or mobile apps, etc., web apps. You can essentially layer information on top of the web, and when you think of any one of these layers as a new environment, we can now define, what are the ways that we want it to work? Okay, well, AIs have to get authorization to even come into the layer. Or this is the same for the metaverse in a way. To come into this specific virtual world, an AI will, if we're going to do this, of course, we're going to force the AI to prove that they should be there. Then we're going to actually have to make humans prove that they're human, right? Because otherwise we're not going to know what's an AI or not. So I'm really interested in the work that's being done by Fractal, by WorldCoin, by some other proof of humanity startups that will allow us to know that whoever we're dealing with is actually a unique human. And if that's the case, then we know that an entity that's not a unique human is a bot. And those bots need to have authorization to go into this virtual world or to participate in this layer over the web. It really gives us now an opportunity to define the types of environments that we want.
I'm glad that you shared that, because it gives great pause and great consideration for our new startup cycle when it comes to lab to funding and lab to market with startups themselves, and more startups. And listen, audience, this is really important. Take note that more startups are using AI more than ever before to be able to help them develop a product. But here's the consideration. If we're expecting, Drew, and our product delivery teams, be it public or private sector, that's going widespread, distributed out to the mass consumption, if we're expecting when the product delivery to be able to adhere to ethical considerations, but that product delivery is now AI itself, what does this translate ultimately into the products that are being developed in innovation? In other words, we have these individuals that are here that are thought to be human until they're not. And we're sitting here saying that we need ethical considerations for AI, but AI is replacing these humans. Who's governing what ethically?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's amazing what you can do already. And this is, really this like generative AI aspect is pretty nascent, and it's crazy what I can do with ChatGPT in terms of just saying, hey, can you build something that will do this, and it will give me step-by-step instructions and the code to build it. And that's going to happen more and more. And I think the one thing we all have to remember is that ultimately AI is just a layer on top of data. AI is only as good as the data that you feed to it. Even generative AI, it's using the data that's been created in the past to create something new. And so how we train these models and what we train them on makes a huge difference. So I think that's going to be something we consider a lot in the future is, how are we training these models, and how are these models being applied and correcting them before it gets too late? But yeah, it's and the other thing to remember is we can use AI to regulate AI, and that seems counterintuitive, but again, it's just data. So we can look at what's generated by AI, and we can use that as data and start being able to identify what AI is. We can start doing things to determine when things are coming, out of the ethical realm. And I think, all these developments are going to be critical in, making sure that we're creating something that's good for humankind.
I really appreciate that sentiment. I sit here and think about these large language foundational models being so widespread and horizontal, Emily. When I think about these type of generative pre-trained transformers that have ascended and that have really met humanity at its front, especially at adoption rates of 100 million users in less than 2 months. When we look at just GPT alone, and certainly it's not a single variable equation of what's being adopted out there when it comes to AI. But I also look forward to the day very soon where I believe, Drew, but Emily, we're coming to you, that when we start to look at the vertical focus of these large language foundational models, wellness GPT, education GPT, psychological GPT, accessibility GPT, where we actually get the practitioners who have been doing the work for years, some for decades, where we when we situate them in a situation where we can bring them into a centralized environment to be able to contribute their human intelligentsia that will be applicable and referenced with reliable and good information and attributed by them that actually have been willing to contribute their data of experience to these platforms that are being developed. To me, that seems more sure and reliable. So when we think about bias GPT, when we think about safety and privacy, Emily, with the work that you have been working on now under this subject, what are your thoughts on this, and what are you seeing?
That's a great question, and it's interesting. As you were explaining all of that, I was thinking about Star Trek, and I was thinking about the Doctor, the hologram in Star Trek Voyager, and he is basically the culmination of so much medical data and so many experiences from doctors and professionals throughout history. But he's a doctor and it works and everyone recognizes his value. And I think that it makes sense that this could be the next progression of the organization of our information. And for me, I think that when it comes to youth in particularly and looking to the future, we need to be discussing not necessarily just our access to information, but our relationship to information. And I think that should be our focus more so. As students, we spend so much time just memorizing information that we can look up, and I think that now especially as AI is starting to transform so rapidly and transform our lives so rapidly, and therefore our relationships, we should be focusing more on our relationships to these tools and how can we use these tools? How can we share information? How do we access information rather than focusing on the information itself? Because knowledge is exponential. If we're constantly just trying to limit our knowledge to what we can hold in our brains at one time, that's not necessarily going to help us fulfill our potential. So I'm very excited to see how this goes. And I think it comes back to, again, what Drew said, that it's all about what we provide. We provide the framework, we provide the data, we provide the baseline. And if we can provide an ethically sound baseline, then our AI can enhance that exponentially.
Indeed. Thank you, Emily, for sharing. Leena, I'm going to jump over to you because I believe that we are starting to see, and I'd like to see more organizations that are specifically dedicated to upholding these ethical standards, and especially when we start talking about inclusive culture and women leadership, communities of color, and just all around having ways for us to be able to build better humanely. With that said, what would encouragement that you would give to these organizations and those that are sitting here listening with us today at GatherVerse Ethical? What would you tell them that should be at the forefront of what they can actually build on and enhance to make better for their culture and for general society? Leena?
Yeah. So I think AI can contribute to a more inclusive and equitable society by addressing bias and discrimination, and it can promote accessibility and ensure equal opportunities. And to leverage its potential, we need diverse and representative data sets to train AI models. Uh, and I think AI can help improve access to education, climate information, healthcare, and other essential services, bridging gaps and empowering marginalized communities. So, uh, for example, I'd like to share what currently we're doing. So, I'm currently working on an AI tool which can translate climate documents into different languages to make climate information more accessible. And not only that, but I uh, want to make sure that we provide resources and opportunities to young girls, especially from Gen Z, uh, so that they can be advocates for climate change in particular.
I think that's brilliant. Organizations, for those that are advocating for better use of AI, try using AI. I find it very interesting. I'll let this in. I talked to an attorney friend of mine just the other day. He's been expressing about the need for high regulation when it comes to AI, and hasn't spent a single day using ChatGPT ever. And I just came to find that out. And the reality is we can't call for regulations if we don't understand what we're regulating. We need to have a sense of what this technology is, and we need to adopt it. We can't 100% abstain. We need to use it. So we don't want to take such a firm stance in saying that I'll never use AI, because I don't think it serves the best interest of your platform, and I don't think it serves the best interest of the people who you're wanting to benefit by regulating and being able to make sure that we put in safeguards. So we need to get familiar with the tech. For those that are listening out here who may be abstaining from using it, especially within the corporate and the public and private sector, let your people use these technologies and tools. And in education, teachers, you're not going to be able to stop your students from using it. And as it was quoted a few weeks ago from a friend, Kate, and said, listen, worried about an education about your students actually using AI to be able to defeat your test will build a better test. So with that said, Salman, I know that you have very apprehensions when it comes to this technology, because I know it comes from a place of common care. How should we be approaching this? If not sensibly, how should we be approaching AI for the first time in our lives as a whole?
Wow, that is a wonder.
Did we lose you, Salman? Perhaps Elon Musk will get him some Starlink. We'll come back to you. Aileda, when we talk about approaching this with an opportunity for humane considerations and gain, when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to large language foundational models, to approach it sensibly, humanely, what does that look like from your lens?
Yeah, so a couple of different things come to mind. One is I want to point out that I feel like, in the business world, one of the things that was always kind of monitored a bit here on the material plane is our monopolization, a monopoly of things. I don't feel like the monopoly was really paid attention to in the internet realm of things. And so I feel like there's been mass players on our field. And this is an opportunity for all of humanity to basically jump in and build and design, really for the first time, without a whole lot of monitoring and regulation yet. And I think that what's really going to be surprising is, so I tell people, it's like we watch TV, right? And when you pay attention to the programming, it looks like we're all out there slaughtering each other, but that's not really the case. Like we walk out our door, most people are helping each other, right? And so it's kind of like, this is our opportunity to rise to the occasion, to be the builders, to be the designers, to pay attention to the data. To your point, Christopher, we need to be responsible about where we're collecting the information from, and who we're sourcing things from, just like we always have. But it's an opportunity to break out of boxes, if you will, for lack of a better term, and programming that we've had in the past, and really be able to see a much brighter future and build and design a much brighter future. Because if we can develop it in there, we should be able to replicate it out here. That's what's really exciting to me about it.
When I think about organizations, Emily, such as music platforms, I'll say, without naming any particular names, when I think about platforms that distribute consumption value that we enjoy, whether it's entertainment or be it music or arts, and when I think about this intersection of liberal arts and technology, and I think about these interactions that we have with it, and they're increasingly becoming more sophisticated, and there is a certain amount of bias that's already present. Now, let's compound that and add that to 10x fold, if you will, if not 50 fold, when it comes to our considerations of what we consume psychologically and mindfully. When we think about where companies are headed, where they're already at when it comes to implicit, explicit bias, is there an opportunity for them to take advantage of these emerging technologies to right that wrong, to make it better, to make it more applicable and more fair use of practice, and generally healthy for our consumption?
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously a lot we can work on when it comes to our media, and it's nice to see a greater diversity of stories being shared. And I think that's really what it's about. It's about the stories that we have and sharing our stories and making sure that we see ourselves represented on the screen. Seeing ourselves represented online is really important. Like, I'm polyamorous pansexual, and I don't think I've ever seen a polyamorous pansexual person in a movie. And that's an interesting experience. When it comes to like the algorithms and recommendation software and how that works with, our media and our music, there's this added layer of bias there, where you have, the behind the scenes biases that come with the production of the stories, the production of the media, who gets to choose what stories are shared. And then you have the choices that come into deciding, well, who gets to stream this story, and then who that is accessing the streams gets to watch it, which users then get access to those stories. So there's loads of different layers and lots of filtering in that. It's kind of nice to see more companies becoming aware of that and the importance of DEI and bringing that into their policies. But it all comes down to the hiring and the access to education and resources so that everybody is able to present their stories. AI is kind of one of those exciting tools that can help to give more people the opportunity to share their stories, where you look at how images and videos can be generated. People can create their own films from their own homes on a lower budget. And that is an amazing opportunity that we can use. So I think it comes back to empowering the individual and making sure that everybody has the resources they need to share their stories and to then connect with people that would be interested in learning from their stories. So I think there's a lot of tools there that we can use.
Indeed. And thank you. And speaking of tools, Ruth, we talk about the filter, but we also talk about the avatar. The avatar seemingly is becoming more authentic week by week. And now that we know that we can use AI to be able to control a deep fake of our own selves and almost near human eye resolutions, we talk about the nature of the avatar. I know you have extensive use in virtual worlds and dealing with an avatar, and there's a bit of apprehension and fear for people of all ages and all generations, assuming the likeness of an avatar that's supposed to be representing them. And instead of us looking at the dark side of the avatar, maybe we might be able to focus with someone that has real experience in understanding the benefit of avatar development itself. And might we be able to embark on what are the benefits on a societal level when we start interacting with our virtual selves?
Yeah, more than ever before, as I've been listening to all the wisdom here, I keep hearing the words, human, know thyself. Know thyself. The more that I can take this technology and let it echo me back to me and learn who I am, what a unique being that I am that will never be fully echoed through the technology, but I can learn about me, then I can hopefully sense better when there is a manipulation happening, when there is harm happening, but also learn how to know others. And so the nonverbals are a lot of how we communicate. And in these avatars, more and more, there's face tracking and there's a reflection of our humanity coming through. And what that can create is, even if you don't speak the same language, which of course AI is now solving for and more able to translate, you're learning to listen differently from the avatars, and you're learning how to synergize with a group of avatars and learn what is the most useful way to benefit this circle. I think there's a frontier we're just starting to lean in and discover around finding our village through this technology and letting that echo us back into our physical reality bodies to be more expressive and intentional with how we connect and what we're actually doing.
And indeed, as we talk about, and thank you, Ruth, as we talk about the use of avatars, what are we using it for? Well, we're ingressing into virtual environments and virtual worlds. And these virtual worlds that we operate in, Drew, they're becoming a lot more sophisticated. And we know there's incredible platforms that are building layer one chains and blockchain technology, and they're using distributed crypto assets and meme coins, altcoins, if you will, and perhaps even fiat converted currencies that will be able to be distributed on ledgers and blockchains. We think about DeFi, DAOs, dApps, and decentralization considerations as a whole. When we're operating in these virtual worlds, and to the audience there, do you spend time in a virtual world? And if so, for what? Is it for entertainment? Do you ingress for business? Do you have a desire to be able to operate fully within a virtual environment, an ecosystem? As mentioned before, we've become more virtual in the past 34 months than we have the past 34 years, and it doesn't seem that we're going back. Drew, as we move further into spatial computing, XR, metaverse, call it what have you, as we move further into this, when it comes to AI-powered worlds, when it comes to buy and sell and trade within these ecosystems of consideration and biological reading of our own selves, anatomical structures, when we walk into these environments, Drew, what does the world and the intersect of Web3 and AI look like? And are we heading into a safe space?
Well, that is a packed question. There's a lot to unpack there.
Sure.
But it's great to think about. I think there's a few things, in terms of the virtualization of everything. It's inevitable that we sit in front of a monitor with a keyboard and sit all day long. That's not how humans were ever meant to do this. Not that walking around in a virtual world is either, but there's something, as interfaces change and as how we interact with technology changes, it opens up a lot of opportunities. And I think, when you get into Web3 and the concept of decentralization, there's a reason why that's gotten interwoven in with this VR AR technology, because decentralization is so key to creating systems. I mean, it's all about systems, right? If you create a system, look, the system that's not working is publicly traded companies have to grow year after year. It's impossible to do that without messing some stuff up and creating this rampant out of control, capitalism. And so how do we create systems that work? And I think that's where AI can come in, and that's how AI can be a good benefactor and a good partner with blockchain technology. There's scams, there's stuff that happens in these communities. People get defrauded, all that kind of stuff. And in a virtual world, we don't see the person. And as humans, we're adapted to read nonverbals and all this stuff, and none of that's there. And so I think that's where AI has the potential to really help with these technologies to sort of weed out the baddies, create systems that are actually sustainable. So that's my thought on that.
It's very interesting when we think about the augment and overlay of society itself, where I really look at the idea that I could pick up a FaceTime call and I believe that it's my friend that's calling me, but it's really not my friend. It's a completely hidden figure and a different person. And to know that I don't have to go into a virtual world to suspect what avatar that I'm talking to, that's actually happening right now in this world with whisper technology, since being able to simulate my voice in less than 7 minutes flat, and at the same time to be able to capture my likeness, if you will, and indiscernible to people that I have care for and have a care for me, and they don't know that they're talking to me. It's one thing to have a different face of a profile on somebody creating a fake profile on Instagram, It's a whole nother thing when there's movability in the matter of the situation. Thanks for sharing that, Drew. When I think about it, David, now when we've talked about with Ruth about the avatar, we talked about with Drew about the operations they're in this Web3 related world of centralized community. And just on that note, are we expecting to see a proliferation of new communities that are going to be developed and deployed in this world that are based on these emerging technologies of the metaverse and AI, David?
Yeah, I think so. I like to think of them, at least one segment of them called meta communities. They would be communities that exist in an overlay on life. So an overlay in the spatial computing world, the physical reality, the virtual world, and even these layers on top of the web. So basically a portable community that goes with you. And I'm sure there's going to be many other types of communities, but for me, it's really interesting to think about how AI can help communities work better, or even groups of people. We talk a lot about personal assistance, and it's pretty clear that you can get any type of personal assistant that you want these days. You can get Michael Jordan to tell you how to shoot hoops, and Tiger to help you learn how to play golf. I mean, you can get a wellness coach. It could be someone famous, just through these large language models. But I think what's going to become really interesting is the work of a guy named David E. Smith. He calls it the augmented conversation. It's really coming back to what Douglas Engelbart was talking about in the 1960s and 1970s, about how AI and computers can help us have better conversations, can help us collaborate and coordinate better so that we can actually tackle our planetary challenges. And that's what we don't have right now with today's web, but it certainly will be enabled by emerging technologies like AI, but also the immersive technologies as well.
Thank you, David. I find it fascinating, something that Isabel de Pruden said, if we don't have people, then we don't have technology. If we don't have humanity, we don't have technology. Leena, I'm coming back to you, and I think it's worth coming back to you on the subject of climate. We see the great disruption that's happening, and the climate is out there. I mean, look at our great state of New York, covered in soot and ash and smoke. When it happened just last week, when we talk about the great fires of the Canadian fires and flow and travel, and you would think that there's a way to be able to disrupt that. Are you leaning in when it comes to AI for climate because you have determined that this is the most important focal point and maybe the greatest way for us to use AI right now to disrupt when it comes to climate solvency? Your mic, Leena. We'll let you figure it out in just a moment. Okay, you good? Go ahead.
I think not only climate, but AI can play a significant role in addressing social challenges by analyzing vast amounts of data and identifying patterns and generating insights. It can contribute to sustainable solutions by optimizing resource usage and predicting and mitigating environmental risks, and facilitating smart city planning to make communities not just sustainable but also safer for women. And AI can also assist in renewable energy management and climate modeling, and advancing sustainable agricultural practices, ultimately promoting a more sustainable and regenerative future.
You bring up a great case for a future debate and argument that's certainly to be had. While some people say we need to take a pause from it, listen, for us that have been using AI, it has been a great benefit to our daily activity and workflow. I use AI, and it's been a great benefit for my studies and research, and I actually find myself learning from it. I literally interact and communicate with it. And so I don't feel like it's such a taboo subject to say that publicly to the thousands of people that are here watching with us right now on GatherVerse.live, and those that are sitting with us here on this panel and our other different social platforms. I don't look at this as a taboo subject. I don't want to feel like it's a taboo subject. I do have a real concern about what it can do into the degradation of society, and it almost feels as if this is a drug, something that you feel like, gee, now that I've used it for so long, how did I ever manage without it? But at the same time, I know that it influences in some capacity to the degradation of the societal ecosystem and infrastructure of how we operate in present times. And so it's a very interesting contrast and dichotomy. Aileda, you got something on that?
I believe I do. That was a lot that you just put out there. The biggest thing that I will say is I also interact with the AI. I love it tremendously for a couple of different reasons. One is back to communication point. It actually like writes my words, like what I'm wanting to say, what I'm really like challenged sometime to say. And it will take my word choices, the way that I would go about writing, the way that I would love to write, and it will actually eloquently put that in place for me. And I read it and I'm like, yes, that's so exactly what I just wanted to say. I've done the same thing, plugging information in, just experimenting with it. Like, I wonder, like, what's it going to tell me about myself if I have it right about this person, right? And these key characteristics, what is it going to relay back to me? So again, that point of, I feel like it can also be very empowering, right? And I feel like also avatar communication allows a lot of people who maybe feel disempowered to be able to take on more of an empowering role on a screen and be able to talk about and air and release some of their vulnerabilities that they might not be able to do in a face-to-face scenario because of perhaps traumas or different situations that they've had. So, again, on the overall whole, on the forefront, I see it as hugely beneficial. Again, mirroring ourselves, just like Ruth said. It's an opportunity.
And it is an opportunity. And I think residually, and I'll speak for all of us, is that take advantage, adopt this technology, build with it, work with it, understand it, because as we've said, AI is not going to take your jobs, but somebody that knows how to use AI will. And it is replacing different infrastructure in society. And it's firm time that we take advantage of using this. With Drew with Web3 and Emily dealing with bias and Ruth dealing with virtual communities and Aileda dealing with humanity, Leena championing the prospects of what this could be as a deterrent when it comes to climate, and David building when it comes to community centralization. We welcome and we thank all of you for being with us today, panel. Take care. Farewell.